I'll be doing a Q&A video, my very first one. I'm kind of late to the game in introducing myself, but hopefully this video answers some of the questions you had for me and you can get to know me a little better. So last week, I asked you guys to send me some questions on Instagram, and mixed in there are also just common questions I've gotten on my videos. Without further ado, let's get started. The first question I got was about my age. I'm 20 years old, I was born in 2002, and I'm currently a sophomore in college. What is my height? I'm 166 or 167 centimeters, so I'm somewhere between 5'5" and 6. What is your ethnicity and where are you from? My ethnicity is Korean and I'm also originally from Korea. I was born and raised there and went to elementary school there until like 4th grade, and then I moved to the US in 2013 when I was 10 years old. So as of 2023, I've lived exactly 10 years in Korea and 10 years in the US. What is my MBTI? I'm an INTJ. I first tested in middle school because we were doing it as a class, and back then I also got INTJ. And out of curiosity, I took the test on my own every year, and I've been getting INTJ every single time, which is kind of interesting. Are you single? Yes, I'm single. What do you do in your free time? I really like doing things with my hands, like making jewelry and miniatures. So those are things like bead rings, necklaces, and clay sculptures, and things like that. I also used to draw and paint a lot back in high school, but it's been harder to do in college as a non-art major, so what I've been doing mostly now is digital art. I post about my artworks on my Instagram from time to time, so if you want to be up to date with what I'm doing with art, you can check that out on my Instagram. What camera and editing apps do you use? Almost all my videos are shot on my phone camera, and I use a Motorola phone. I'm a very loyal Android user when it comes to phones, so I don't think that'll change anytime soon. I do remember for the first 2 or 3 vlogs I posted, I did use my dad's DSLR that I borrowed, but videos after those are almost exclusively filmed on my phone. For editing, I use Final Cut Pro. I got it as a part of this education bundle. There's a really good student discount, so I just decided to get it while I could as a student. If you're just starting out or looking to get into editing, I would highly recommend doing the free trials that all of these apps offer and see what works for you, what's the most intuitive and easy to use. Why did you choose your major? This past semester, I declared neuroscience as my major. I would say there are 2 main things that made me choose neuroscience, the first being my personal interest. I've always been fascinated by the brain and the mind, and I always enjoyed biology, so it seemed like a pretty natural choice for me. The second reason is more practical in that I plan on going to medical school after undergrad, and the course requirements for this major aligned really well with what med schools were looking for, so it was a pretty attractive choice for me. How did you get into colleges, and how did you end up at Harvard? To give you a short, condensed version of the answer for the sake of time, I would say storytelling and luck. I did work really hard in high school to get competitive scores and GPA, but I'm sure a lot of other applicants to the same schools had pretty similar stats. I think scores and numbers can only get you so far, and beyond that, you do need that extra spice in your application. That, for me, I think was storytelling. So I basically chose like 2 to 3 things I really enjoyed and was good at to weave them into a giant narrative. For example, something I really liked was music. I played viola and did orchestra, and another thing I liked was writing. So what I would do is try to find overlaps between music and writing, like the fact that both are like telling a story and a form of self-expression. And then I would sort of make that the central theme or the skeleton of my application and then add any other details around them. In high school, there's only really so many activities and sports you could be doing, so what's important I think is to create your own signature combination of different activities. This definitely makes your application more memorable and likable because there's a story behind it. And a related question I got was tips for getting into Harvard and other selective colleges. First off, the college admissions process is super subjective, and I think that's especially the case for schools in the US. There are so many factors that go into it, and how much each factor matters is different for each person, each reader, and there's just a whole lot of complicated things that are completely out of our control and expectations. With that being said, I think it's important to focus on the things we can do and change the things we can change, like the essay. By the time you're applying, you probably already have your GPA and test scores, so really the only thing you have in your control is the essay and how you sort of package yourself, which I talked about in the previous question. A related tip would be to do all the optional things they tell you to do. Sometimes these schools use confusing language like you can choose to submit, if you wish, supplement, things like that. They make it sound like these are truly optional, and when you're in the middle of the grind and writing your 10th application, you might buy into that. But if you think about it, it's kind of like a bait or another test almost, in that it's just another way for them to gauge how interested and invested you are to that school. So I would highly recommend you do all the optional things. And these are always just additional essays. It might also be something like a video essay I remember I did for Brown, or interviews, art supplements, things like that. Study tips. I previously posted a detailed video on study tips, so I'll be linking that down in the description. But to add something I didn't include in that video, I realized that I study better when I'm kind of cold and hungry. And take this with a grain of salt because this definitely is not for everyone. It's just to say that you have to find the optimal physical condition that puts you in your best mental state. Personally, when I'm warm and comfy, I tend to get lazy and pretty generous with myself, but if the room I'm in is cold, it's really hard for me to fall asleep and forces me to stay awake physically. When I'm full, I'll probably be in a food coma, so I'm better off when I'm a little hungry. So basically when I'm cold and hungry. But the keyword here is slightly because you never want to push yourself too far. Tips for extracurriculars in high school. This is sort of in continuation of what I've been saying before, but I would say do what you want to do, but try to make a story and find an overall purpose. It's a really good idea to try everything your freshman year and then pare it down to what you actually like and want to continue doing in sophomore and junior year. This way, you have a lot more time and energy to be pursuing things you actually like, and this is going to make you better at those things as well. It's always scary to quit something. I also struggled a lot with letting go of things in high school, even if it didn't work out and objectively was not a good idea, just because of that label of being a quitter. But it's so much better to cut out things that don't work and focus yourself on the things that actually matter to you, because you are, at the end of the day, one person and a limited quantity. And from the other side, don't be scared to start something new midway. For me, something I picked up in the middle of high school was creative writing. I did write before, but it was mostly writing in my own diary, and I had never thought about showing it to anyone else. And then in my junior year, I took an English class where we did some creative writing and we were encouraged to submit our writings elsewhere. So without any expectation, I tried submitting some of my writings and they were accepted, surprisingly. Although this was pretty late in my high school career, I realized that people actually might enjoy and appreciate what I'm creating, and writing became a big part of me and what I did in high school. I don't think there's a magic number of extracurriculars or clubs or sports that's better than the rest, but I saw that focusing on usually 2 to 3 things works out for most people. And this doesn't mean strictly 2 to 3 clubs or sports. You could be grouping different activities into buckets. Like for music, you could be playing an instrument, but also studying music theory and volunteering to perform at nursing homes, things like that. So in a sentence, try everything in the beginning and be bold in cutting out things that don't work out and adding new things that you really like. What were your high school stats, SAT, ACT, and GPA? I was a little hesitant about talking about my scores and stats before because I do think they are a pretty private part about me, but I remember in high school when I was applying to colleges myself, I would also look up what people's scores were online on YouTube for a benchmark. So in hopes of being a similar resource, I'll leave mine here. The stats I submitted were 4.0 on weighted GPA, 4.8 weighted GPA, and 36 composite for ACT, and I think I had 135 in the breakdown in one of the sections. I'm not sure if SAT subject tests are still a thing, but I did it my year and I did biology M and math level 2 and got 800. Some of you were also wondering how many times I took the tests, and I took them once in junior year. AP versus IB, and which courses did you take? Our high school only did AP, so that's what I did. My school offered a whole bunch of different AP courses, and the ones I took were AP US History, European History, Spanish Language and Culture, English Language, English Literature, Physics C, E&M, Chemistry, Biology, Government, Statistics, Calc BC, and Macroeconomics. And then in junior year, I also self-studied AP Music Theory and took the test on my own. How do you manage social life, academics, and personal life in college? If you asked me the same question last year, I would probably have said sleeping less, but this semester I was definitely better at balancing my life. And most of it is because I learned to use my tools and resources to my advantage, and two of the apps that really saved my ass were Notion and Google Calendar. I record every single thing I have to do and attend on these two platforms, and it really keeps me from going insane and forces me to complete everything I have to do since they're right in front of my eyes on my phone and computer, all my devices. The important thing is to find a long-term organization method that really works for you and something that you feel comfortable logging and using every day. And not constantly being under the pressure of having the perfect trifecta, the perfect balance, also is really helpful for me. There's definitely weeks where my life is dominated by the social aspects, and there's also weeks in my life where I'm just in the library doing work. So it really depends on what the situation asks of me and trying to work out what I can handle myself. Favorite Korean food? My favorite Korean food is hobakjeon or zucchini pancakes. And I also really like sundubujigae, which is a tofu stew, and jjajangmyeon, which is black bean noodles. Rate the food at Harvard. It definitely ranges. It has its good days and bad days. But I do think that the general consensus among the undergrads at least is that the dining hall food at Harvard isn't the best compared to other colleges. Personally, I don't have trouble with it. I kind of like the dining hall food actually. There's always at least one item in the menu that I like in a given meal, but there are things that I do avoid. I do remember there was this one traumatic episode when I went in for dinner one day and they had this blueberry pork mixture. It was a plate of white pork, and on top of it, it was drenched in purple sauce and like blueberry chunks, and that's where I drew the line. Other than that, it's been actually pretty good. But on the flip side, the desserts are really good. I don't think I've been disappointed by a single dessert. What book am I reading? What's my favorite book? And do you have any book recommendations? I'm currently reading The Rings of Saturn, which I got as a Christmas gift for myself. I sort of got it because the book cover is gorgeous and also the ratings were stellar, but now that I'm halfway through it, I realize it's a very demanding book to read. You really have to be engaged because it's easy to lose track of what's going on, and there's a lot of specific historical things that I have to look up. But the language is really beautiful. It's translated from German, and the whole thing kind of feels like a giant dream, which is really cool. I have a couple of favorite books, and the first one I would say is Almond by Son Won-pyong. It's a story about this boy who has an impaired amygdala, which is the emotional center in the brain. So that means he can't feel emotions or have empathy. And then he meets his classmate who is the polar opposite of himself and is angry and emotional all the time, and the story is basically about their friendship. I've never cried for a book or a movie before, but this one, I was on the verge of tears in some moments, and for me, that's saying a lot. So if you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend this book. I also liked Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, and When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, which my friend recommended it to me, and lastly, 밝은 밤 or Bright Night by Chae-young. Favorite movie? Some of my childhood movies that I still really love are Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Castle in the Sky. I also loved watching The Shape of Water and Avatar. My favorite songs and artists. They're always changing, but my favorite at the moment is Feudal Devices, which was a song from the movie Call Me By Your Name. I've also been listening to the Cramps Google Muck a lot these days. This is the one that's famous as the Wednesday song. By the way, I absolutely love that scene so much. I already know what I'm gonna be this year for Halloween, and hopefully by then I can actually learn the dance moves. Someone also asked me who my favorite K-pop artist is. I really like Lee and TXT. There's a song by Lee called My Spring. This was, I believe, also in the K-drama My Liberation Notes. It's a song that really consoles me at the end of the day. I think I'd listen to it at least once a day, to be honest. Favorite K-dramas. I really liked My Liberation Notes, My Love from the Star, and Scarlet Lovers. My favorite YouTubers/YouTube channels. My favorite YouTubers are KDU, Dobochobo, Use Beauty, Teamd, Eeyore, Mungjungdagwa, there's a lot, Moya Mawini, and Leah's Field Notes. These creators seem to have a super warm and genuine personality, and it's always a treat to watch their videos. Some of you guys were wondering what my future plans were, what I'll be doing after university. As I mentioned before, I'm on the pre-med track and plan on going to med school after undergrad. If you're talking a more long-term future, like a career, I want to become a surgeon. I love making things and doing things with my hands, especially when it's something tiny and intricate. So combined with my interest in biology and medicine, it's something I really want to do in the future. And while I do the things I already like, I'll also get to make a difference in other people's lives, which would be really meaningful. Specifically as of now, otolaryngology. I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but head and neck surgery seems really cool, and plastic surgery as well. Aside from medicine, some of my other future goals would be trying to live abroad, designing my own jewelry, composing movie music, different independent projects like that. Do you have any New Year's resolutions? To sum it all up in one sentence, it'd be to slow down my life. The past year has been a lot of hustle for me, and I acknowledge that a certain amount of hustle is good for me and my career, but I want to learn to relax sometimes and take the time to reflect and record better this year. One thing in particular I want to get into is skincare. Some of my bestest friends are actual skincare masters, and I want to take after them a little bit more. I did improve a little last year, like starting to put lotion and sunscreen on my face every day, but I definitely want to take better care of my skin and myself in general this year. How do you get out of a rut? When I sense that I'm going into a slump, I stop whatever I'm doing and I literally just curl up in my bed. If I try to do anything to fix it, it usually ends up being counterproductive, so I just take the time to acknowledge my feelings and give myself not only a physical but an emotional break. What I do mostly is stay still and not let myself do anything until I'm so bored, until I'm at this state of boredom that is unbearable, and then slowly get back into my routine, using this boredom as a driving force, ironically. Instead of forcing myself to do work all the time and assume all responsibility, I think it's really important for me to accept my limitations and what is realistic before I can recover. And sometimes I just write. I open up a page or a Google Doc and start writing whatever it is that comes to my mind and how I'm feeling. When I write my problems down, I'm kind of externalizing them, making them valid and more of a reality to myself. This helps me brainstorm solutions if it's something that can have solutions or consoles me at the least. But everyone, no matter who it is, what you do, is bound to be in a slump at some point. And if you happen to be in that stage right now, you are totally not alone. Make sure you're being kind to yourself, maybe going out on a little solo date, treating yourself with your favorite food, or anything else that makes you a little happier. And that's it for the Q&A today. I hope this answered your questions about me, and I already feel a lot closer to you. Happy New Year, and I hope you have the best start to 2023. Thanks, and see you next time.